and ask the clerk to take roll call.
Bodie,
Here.
Carberry Montgomery,
Here.
Kroll,
Here.
Rosendahl,
Here.
and McBurney is absent.
All right. Item 2 on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Whatever you want.
Motion by Rosendahl, second by Carberry Montgomery. All in favor, or sorry, discussion, vote.
Rosendahl,
Yes.
Carberry Montgomery,
Yes.
Bodie,
Yes.
Kroll.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Item 3 is a regular agenda item. We have one item to discuss tonight. It's item 3.1, and it's to discuss HR 8753 postal code legislation. And Annika is here, I'm assuming, to brief us on this matter and kick us off.
Yep. Annika, if you would, please.
All right. So,
If I may interject for just a moment, Mayor Pro Tem Kroll, do you have the statement to note on the agenda?
yes, we have to do this first.
The justifying statement for the meeting and the notice requirements
yes,
being
I sure do. Okay. So I can, this meeting is the December 18th, 2024 special Urbandale City Council meeting will be held via WebEx virtual meeting pursuant to Iowa Code 21.4, 2.A.N2B. 24-hour notice was impassable or impractical. Public access will be provided in person at City Hall, 3600 86th Street, and the meeting will be live streamed on the Urbandale City Council YouTube page. All right, and that takes us to
I apologize. The additional detailed statement, I guess, was sent to me, and I was not aware of that.
This is Annika again. I will about the meeting today, if that's acceptable.
Thank you. Yes, that would be great.
I didn't hear what Annika said.
I have the statement in front of me, and I'll gladly read it if that's acceptable to everyone.
Yeah, I do not have it. That'd be great.
All right. At approximately 3 p.m. today, staff received notice from the offices of U.S. Senator Grassley and U.S. Senator Ernst that consideration of H.R. 8753 to direct the United States Postal Service to designate single unique zip codes for certain communities and for other purposes was accelerating in the Senate. Their offices requested a decision by the end of the day. Staff immediately began preparations to verify a quorum of the City Council and publish notice of the meeting.
Great, thank you for that. And then I just lost my agenda, sorry. Item 3.1 is to discuss HR 8753 and the postal code legislation. So I will turn it back over to Annika.
All right, so the statement does cue us up nicely. Basically, we are at kind of an apex point or a possible endpoint for our zip code journey that we've been on to bring everybody up to speed and kind of explain. Just over a year ago, we received word from our kind of regional postal service partners that they were going to make some major changes to our zip codes. City found those proposed changes or planned changes to be unacceptable. We worked through all of the available administrative processes. So we submitted a zip code boundary review that was reviewed. It took many months. It was mostly denied. So we submitted an appeal of that review. The post office really treated the city poorly in that process, in my opinion. First, they said that they never received the appeal. Then they said that they, when confronted with evidence that they had received it, they said that they lost it. And finally, they wrote to the senators and said it was an administrative oversight, that it wasn't routed correctly. and we're well past the deadline that they had given themselves to respond by. We are waiting for that response. Still, it is technically pending, but it is essentially long overdue. And our senators' offices, Grassley and Ernst, that we've been working with very closely, their best guess is that we will not receive a favorable review of that appeal. They do not expect us to get what we have asked for. So that's where that part of the process is, that administrative portion. In the meantime, during the last year, the city has been trying to get help from any party that we could think of to assist us with that administrative appeal and any other means that we would have to get resolution. And so we have been part of some meetings with a national zip code coalition. It's a group of cities that have similar zip code problems across the country. And they provided some technical assistance with that administrative process and then some advice. And that group has been meeting for some time, and they've been working on possible legislative resolutions, right? They have run through their zip code boundary review and their appeal process, and they did not get what they wanted. So they still have a problem. Well, the only possible resolution at that point is a legislative one. Congress has to, at that point, direct the post office to do something. And that coalition worked, it's very loose. There's many separate groups, various legislative pieces. A surprise this year, I think that many of you have heard about, was that there was a more inclusive piece of legislation that was authored by Congresswoman Lauren Boebert's office in Colorado. She authored it without much input from any of the cities that would be impacted. I believe she has impacted cities both in her old district, her current district, and in the new district that she'll be serving in. And so this is a priority for her, and she has been working very hard to get this bill passed. And so this is H.R. 8753. It directs the United States Postal Service to designate a single unique zip code for 51 communities, including the city of Urbandale. If the city of Urbandale was writing the legislation, we would not have written it with that exact language. We would have come up with something a little less blunt. And we did make some proposals when we became aware of the legislation. Unfortunately, it was really too late in the legislative process for those to be considered. So the bill is where it is. It passed through a House committee and through a voice vote on the House floor last week. And we asked our senators' offices to keep an eye on this bill for us, to keep tabs and to keep us informed. So that's what they've been doing. And just this morning, there was a big shift, I think, in the Senate and over the course of the day today. And there's a lot of pressure on the Senate now to move forward with this bill on to the next step. Currently, our senators, because we've been asking them to keep tabs on this legislation for us and watch out for our best interests, they have what's called a hold on the bill. So they are indicating that they need more information or they're not ready to support it. It basically cannot move forward as long as they have this hold on this bill. And so they need direction from us, from the city of Urbandale, on what they should do. Should they keep the hold on the bill, or should they release the hold on the bill? And if they release the hold on the bill has the possibility of moving forward. It seems somewhat likely that it will move forward, but it is a changing situation. It changes essentially by the minute at this point because it's so close to the end of the session and because this bill is so close to its finish line. So why is this bill? This bill is written for these 51 communities. It says as inclusive of a list as the House committee could come up with. And it is an almost identical language copy of the bill from the last time similar legislation was passed in 2006. when Congress directed the United States Postal Service to designate single unique zip codes for a handful of communities across the country. And you'll note that I said 2006 is the last time a similar piece of legislation passed. It is city staff's belief, and it is the advice that we have received from our senators' offices, that this is likely to, if this bill moves forward, it is likely the only chance that we would have to be on a similar piece of legislation. There likely would not be another one for a long time. And so that is part of what we want to think about as we're getting ready to get back to our senators' offices. We as a city support this legislation. It does have some benefits for us that we want to consider. So it definitely improves uniformity and unity for the city of Urbandale, right? One city, one zip code, everywhere you are. No more of this, well, I'm north of here and west of here, I'm something else. There's no chance that you're having to write some other city name on your envelope. You don't have to pay taxes to the city of Urbandale and vote in Urbandale elections, but receive your mail to Grimes. And when we have so many divisions in our community, we have many school districts, we have 2 counties, we have sewer districts, we have all of these ways that our community is broken up into different identities. It may be helpful to have that single, unique identifier. For sure that you are an Urbandale resident, a member of this community. This would be a durable solution, and it's a clear solution. The last time, so before this past year, the last time that the city of Urbandale asked for something like this was about the year 2000. That was about the North Park Drive corridor, and that's in the Johnston zip code right now, principally. And we asked with Senator Grassley's office nicely through the administrative process for the post office to put that into the city of Urbandale, and they refused. And we as a city have been living with that refusal and no movement on it for 20 some odd years, and that request was in our zip code boundary review request, our original one. That's part of the review request that was denied, was that same request we've been making for 25 years. Still no. And when we have those zip code divisions, it does impact a little bit city services, identity, signage, just how we think about ourselves and who's here. So we like the idea that we would have a single unique zip code that would be a durable solution, something that we're not having to fight about for another 25 years. And then, all the administrative solutions that the post office might offer, they are complicated and difficult to explain, and they require surveys. You do remove all of those barriers. All of that being said, you can imagine, we can all imagine what it will be like if we are successful with this, if this legislation is successful and moves forward and is signed into law. We would not be a 2 zip code plus community anymore. We would be a single zip code community. That means hundreds of people, residents and businesses, would be directed by the United States Postal Service to change their zip code. And that will be something that the city will be expected to answer questions about. Currently, I take a lot of those, but I imagine it would be a volume that would impact everyone on this call. So we do want to be mindful of what that would be like and think about, again, if this were to move forward, if it were to be successful, how we would get ahead of that scenario, what we could do proactively, to prepare ourselves and the community. The post office is probably not going to love this legislation. They don't really like to have their business meddled with by Congress, even though it is Congress's prerogative to do so. And so I don't know what that process will be like. I know that it will be their responsibility to enact this legislation according to the law that would be in place, but we don't know exactly how they would do that. So we can think through that, but that is an admittedly unknown item. And then, I think it is just something that we should seriously consider how we want to handle it. But it is looking like this is maybe a once-in-a-lifetime, essentially, opportunity to make a big change, to make it a big improvement for community identity. And so with that, I'm going to let AJ talk if there's anything that he wants to talk about, and then I'm going to gladly be here to answer any questions and to try to problem solve with everybody as we think about this.
Well, Annika, thank you. Madam Mayor, Pro Tem, and members of council, the situation was outlined very succinctly by Annika. It's been a process that we've been engaged with. Those of you who went to the Washington trip in May knew that Curtis raised this issue with our congressional delegation. We've worked closely with them to try to find a resolution to this issue. This has taken on a life of its own. And again, as Annika mentioned, we had no input as to the legislation, but it is what it is as we stand here today at 5:52 p.m. on December 18th. We can tell you, based on our conversations with our legislative representatives, that if this does not go further in this process, that we cannot represent that there is a better option out there. Again, a new Congress will take shape in January. There's a new administration. There is a number of unknowns out there that this is, again, a piece of legislation like many others that may just die at the end of the session or get passed, and then they move on to other national business. We do know that the representative that is promoted this has very specific interests. There are 50-plus communities in this coalition throughout the nation. This will affect them, as Annika said, in different ways, and the impact is different. We learned today in our conversation with staff that in Colorado, for example, the assignment of zip codes does play an impact on property tax collections. So there is a revenue-related issue. In California, there's other issues associated with zip codes, as minor as where kids get to register for Little Leagues, to congressional districts, to everything else that you can imagine that zip codes are tied to. And as we grew out west, and she mentioned this earlier, we have new residents and new neighborhoods that have been assigned zip codes that are in the city of Urbandale that have a zip code or a mail delivery designation out of the city of Grimes or out of the city of Waukee. And Annika has been fielding hundreds of calls and inquiries from these folks who say, can't you do something for us? And that was kind of the precursor to all of this work that's moved forward. So here we are at this point in time where we're being asked directly by our senator's office. They have put a hold on this. They have both said that their priority is to look out for us. We are the only Iowa community in this coalition. So it's easy to say that we have their attention at the national level. That, looking out for us is they've got no one else on that list in Iowa. So, but they are giving us their best wisdom and congressional experience that this is, if we're looking for a resolution to this issue that we've been working toward, this could be our chance to get it, but it is not without other issues associated with it. Again, we presume that one of the two zip codes would be selected if this does pass. We don't know which one it would be, and more than likely, we would not have any input as to what that would be. There would be a period of disruption, depending upon what zip code you're in. There are businesses that have zip code addresses related for their business activities that are in motion that they would have to change. Residents would have to change as well. Things that have your zip code to it would have, you would as a resident or business would have to go through a process, that you would undertake yourself to make those corrections. And as Annika made it related to, there would be an emphasis from the city to get ahead of this issue as much as we can, to say this, if it does pass, this is what's going to happen. If we have a date certain, that would be good. And that here are things as a resident or business you should be aware of and make the preparations for those changes. Our economic development department would work as best they could with the business community to make them aware of this. And then again, through whatever means we can develop, that we would have to project that message out. It is what it is as what we know today at almost 6 o'clock at night. These folks from the congressional office, the pressure is on them. They even said they're getting calls. They would like Ernst and Grassley to remove their hold. But we also found out later today, probably about 40 minutes ago, Annika, that there are 2 senators in Oklahoma now that have placed a hold on it. So there are issues, I'm assuming, from other communities that are being raised with their congressional delegations. I will say that I gathered all of our staff that we could, directors today, and we talked it through from an operational perspective. How will this, if at all, interfere with our operations in delivering services? It was interesting that Mike Cardwell, who came to us from Cincinnati area, about the same time I came, said that he had been in a community that went through this. And in fact, there were issues, but they weren't insurmountable, and that it did exactly what Annika outlined earlier, that it resolved an issue of multiple zip code related issues, and it then created an environment where the community was identifiable by one zip code. From his fire chief hat, he didn't see a problem with this. The police chief did not see a problem with our delivery of emergency services with any changes. We have issues that we would have to work out when we do mailings and everything else. There are behind the scene issues that we would just have to work with, and that would be fine because they are not insurmountable. They just take a little diligence on our part. There is, of course, as we talked on so many issues, there is the issue of perception from the public and the reaction from the public. And that's where we would have to develop a plan that would be as comprehensive and as forward-thinking as possible to address those questions in advance. Kind of a Q&A sheet, if you will, or something. Again, I'm just kind of thinking quickly as we talk today, how do I then, what does this mean for me if I live here in my zip code? What do I have to do? Will this affect this? How will I get my mail if I work from home? All those things are going to be out there. My guess is we would probably get some direction from the Postal Service as to how this will be implemented and what time frame it would be if in fact this passes. So again, this is, and again, part of a national coalition. If in fact the senators continue their hold and this does not make it through the legislative time frames, as Annika said, it'll die. And then it would have to start a process all over again that could be the same, could be different. We don't know. So that's where they're at. And it has accelerated to the point where there is, as she mentioned, there is a lot of pressure being pushed out at the Washington level to get this thing done. And again, politics being where they are at the national level, your guess is as good as mine as how that's working its way through the system and who's calling who. But our congressional delegation is getting calls, and that's why they wanted us to come to some conclusion as to whether or not we would remain as part of this bill. I'd also mention that we made inquiries as to any possible amendments and they said there would be no opportunity for such. That what is presented under House File 8753 is what it is. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I think between Annika and I, we've probably given you as best a viewpoint as we can, and we will answer the questions that we can.
Have you heard from any of the other 50 communities that are in this coalition, how they are responding to this news?
Yeah, so everyone in the coalition is extremely excited. This is something they've been working really hard for. Like I said, the vast majority of the communities in the coalition have been working on this for a long time, and they've exhausted every other option that they have, and this is the farthest that they've gotten, the closest they've come to a solution. And now, not everyone who is on this bill is in the coalition. Those are, they overlap, but they're not the same groups. I think Curtis reached out to one of the communities. We've been trying a few of the communities across the country that we haven't talked to as part of the coalition, just to check in with other folks in similar situations. Curtis successfully reached out to a community in Florida today that's a similar size to us and has a similar problem, and they're very excited. This is something that they really want. I reached out, to Carmel, Indiana, and talked with someone there, and they were just like, "What? We're on this bill? Nobody told us." So it's a wide variety, but the vast majority of the people who are on this bill, coalition or not, they're excited to be on this. This is a huge potential win for them. Like I said, impacting their tax revenues, impacting their citizens' ability to get fire insurance in California, and then really minor stuff that we don't really think about, but that your zip code may also impact just because it's such an easy designator. When you fill out a form, like, what community are you from? When you visit somewhere else, it runs the gambit. For us, it's maybe mostly, identity and a desire for better postal service. But for some communities, this is a really life-changing bill that's critical for them.
Well, I feel like, this has been a top legislative priority for us. So at this point, for us to not support this seems to question whether or not it was really a priority. And I think it is a priority. I hate to see that one of the biggest, they're not the biggest, but, Delta Dental, for example. They impact almost everyone in the state. And you get mail from them, and what does it say? Johnston. So, and if you're hearing from people out in my neck of the woods, residents obviously are supportive. One half of the community is going to get a little irritated, probably that they have to change residentially and the businesses. But I feel like if Aaron and our marketing communications team and the chamber, I think these are obstacles that we can overcome. And I think that one less thing, as you started in your initial comments, one less thing to have a divide in our community is, if we can eliminate that, then I say we should support that or do whatever you're asking us to do.
Yeah.
This meeting.
Yeah, the specific thing that we're going to go back to our senators with is keep the hold on the bill, aka kill it, or release the hold on the bill and let it go to a vote if it is able to do that.
One other question related to the hold. So you had indicated, or AJ, that there were a couple of the Oklahoma delegation that had put a hold on it. Are there Oklahoma cities on the list?
I had the same question, and I pulled up the legislation, and I did not see any Oklahoma cities on that list, so that was surprising to me. I don't know what kind of a concern those senators might have if they don't have somebody in their community or in their constituent group on this bill, but hopefully that, is something that they would be able to resolve with the other senators and with the representatives. And I know that the bill's author has been working really hard to get this passed, and her senator, Congresswoman Boebert's office has been in contact with us today, and I know they're in contact with the other senators' offices and other constituent groups across the country.
I would imagine it's possible that there are some communities in Oklahoma that wanted to be on that bill.
Yeah, that's entirely likely.
Yep, could be. That's a good point, Pat.
Is there, I guess maybe I missed this, how did we end up on this list versus some other communities, maybe the Oklahoma ones? Is it because we joined this coalition?
Yeah. I think it's because, like I said, we started attending the meetings of this coalition. It's a little bit of a stretch to say we joined, but we started attending, and so we were on their contact list, and I believe that contact list is what got us on this legislation. But that's our best understanding.
It almost started as a support group for Annika, quite honestly. And then it gravitated to a point where more formality.
Yeah.
And Curtis attended a national conference of ICMA, the City Managers Group, and he joined a group of city managers who represented these communities in this coalition, and they had the same concerns and issues. He said it was a very familiar conversation that they were all having about the problems that they had and the frustrations with the postal system. And they were all fairly convinced that a legislative remedy was really their best bet. And I think after Annika explained the rather detailed appeal process that we went through and received denial after denial, that process that they outlined, that we followed, has led us to a legislative action. My guess is that other communities had similar experiences. So what we're looking for is your concurrence, that if there is a concurrence, that we will then contact the legislative offices and ask them to lift their block on this, their hold, and then we'll see what happens the remainder of the calendar year. But as Annika said, this has taken a fairly unusual fast track given the time of year and the changes that are upcoming in the next legislative session.
When does this session end?
So they have to pass a continuing resolution, and so the Senate is planning to stay in session until they do that. It's my best understanding, talking with the staff. That probably would be sometime this weekend, but that's their big piece that the Senate is concerned about. So that the rest of the session will be framed around that.
If we say, okay, drop the hold, and this doesn't go through, is that going to sour relationships that we already have with the Postal Service, or are they as bad as they're going to get? We haven't been able to move anything forward.
So I've been working very closely with Senator Ernst in our grassroots office and with Congressman Nunn's office. But the senator's offices in particular have expertise around working with the post office, and they have been extremely disappointed. I will put words in their mouth. They've been extremely disappointed with the post office's response to us. I think their offices would agree with me that I think it would be hard for our relationship with the post office to get any worse. And in fact, the best advice that we had on that particular issue was to stay on the bill because it increases our kind of leverage and bargaining power. We look like we're very serious about solving this issue when we stay on this bill. So whether it passes or whether it dies and is brought up again in the new session, I think there's probably very little downside in terms of our relationship with the post office, and there is upside in terms of our relationship with the bill's author and with all of the other coalition members and the communities who are on this bill. They would like our support.
Yes,
You-
I for one feel that it's appropriate to pull the hold. I think it makes sense.
Annika, I think you had indicated that you had asked if there was the opportunity to make amendments to the bill. What amendments would you like to see what would you see that would make it better if that was an opportunity?
Sure.
Or maybe there's not one.
Yeah. We made a couple of suggestions that we sent to our representative and our senator. They were generally well received by those offices, but it was just too late in the process, like I said. So one
Can you
option
just
that
High level, what were those?
Yeah, one option was really, instead of just saying shall designate a single unique, it added in consultation with the consent of the communities.
Okay.
Hoping that would give us a little leverage in terms of when that came to pass. If there were sticking points, like things that we felt were really terrible, maybe the post office would feel obligated to talk with us a little bit. And then another option was just very technical, and it was an option that was based on some legislation that Senator Rubio had authored for Fort Myers on another bill. We just kind of mirrored that, but for Urbandale. So that was very technical specific technical language. So there were two choices, sort of a general, be nice when you do this, or I think, yeah.
And it is important to know if you haven't looked at this, it is literally like 2 sentences of language with a list of communities. So there's not much there to amend. I was a little surprised actually when I started looking at it. So,
Yeah, it's very simple. True.
Yeah, this is one that can't be, they shared with us, again, at the federal level, there was a Supreme Court ruling basically saying that Congress, you have to be specific in your language because there's too much ambiguity. And so this one was very straightforward.
And it still is not going to address the issue for the hundreds of other communities that I'm sure are also struggling with similar issues. So it's a Band-Aid at a minimum.
If you are a growing community and you are then growing into different zip codes within your community, then you will be faced with the same issue. When we started these discussions, aside from the national coalition, we had numerous meetings with other metro cities. We reached out and said, who's had this problem? Because I think it was, correct me, Annika, I think it was Bondurant had an issue and they had it resolved congressionally. Clive had a similar issue many years ago. So we're not unique to the metro that's had this issue. And again, I can't remember which representative it was from which office today said, there are several cities that are significantly larger than Urbandale that have one zip code. Now, how that designation came about, or if it was something that they combined multiple, like we talked about here, where you had a designation of one within your geographic boundaries, don't know those circumstances, but I think they shared that with us, in my interpretation, to say it's been done before. And you guys there's a way, you just have to work this through. If this, we believe, is their best option, then we understand that there will be some pain, but it'll be a long-term resolution, and it will be very, very clear. You get a one designation.
So staff is recommending that we would pursue or whatever, tell our senators to drop the hold. That's what you're recommending.
The consensus when our directors met, and we've had a lot of discussions today about this, and I think it is, we are in a position as a staff to say this is your best option at this point with nothing else that we can say is going forward. We recognize that there will be work ahead and that there will be a period of adjustment. I will tell you that having Mike Cardwell there and speak to his past experience certainly aided in the conversation because again, I'll repeat myself, I looked at it initially as operationally, is this going to present a problem for us delivering services? And the answer was no. And that was my major concern, especially in fire and EMS delivery, and it's not going to create a problem. Neither chief said it would be a problem for them.
Aaron, do you have any comments from the business side of things?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's going to be issues with folks. I mean, change is hard with this and with, particularly our insurance companies as they relate to their regulations and things that they're, having to do their licensures with all their states and things. They've communicated to us that the zip code is an important thing in those submittals and things. However, with this legislation, they would have to do it regardless with that. So it's not necessarily the city of Urbandale imposing this on them; it's the federal government imposing this on them. So the hassle's still there. Where it came from is not us.
I think it makes sense to go forward and have them drop the hold as well. I mean, I hesitate because I think it could backfire, but on the flip side, I don't really see any other mechanism to move forward at this time.
Do you know what committees this would go to, or would it go through any committees?
Yeah, so I tried to get some clarification on that. When it was passed out of the House, it was referred to the Homeland Security Committee in the Senate. I guess that is the committee that oversees the post office, so that's how it got there. I'm a little unclear at this point, honestly, whether it needs to be heard by that committee or if the committee just kind of refers it out and then it goes to the floor. But essentially, the major action at this point is it would go to the floor. That's the and neither of our senators sit on the committee that it was referred to.
Okay.
I think they made that clear to us today, if I recall, that this is, again, as it's being fast-tracked,
Right.
it would go that direction.
Well, just because we might end up being supportive of our senators withdrawing their hold, that doesn't mean this bill moves forward. There's other holds. So
Right.
We're kind of a little bit of a cog in a big wheel. And I guess at this stage, I would be supportive of withdrawing the hold, of us advising our senators that we're supportive of withdrawing the hold. But I do think we're going to have to really think long and hard about how we support our businesses through this change if it does happen.
Yeah, that's very clear, Pat. It's the messaging that we take forward, and what support we can offer as a city is going to be critical for them. And again, Bridget made reference to Aaron and his contacts with the business community, that he and his staff will get out ahead of this as best they can if it becomes a reality.
I'll note that I have Derek sitting with me. He kindly lent me his laptop for this meeting. It's an emergency meeting where emergency measures were taken. If you had any concerns for Derek, he is listening and he is here. So.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering if, I'm sure you haven't come up with the plan yet, but the plan is in your wheelhouse, I'm sure, a communication plan and.
Absolutely. We'd have a large communication plan created just for this alone to educate the community, the unification of one zip code for Urbandale. Like
And-
a large plan.
And
We
one
can
of
have
the
a
few
party.
things that, one of the few things that is actually in the legislation is there's 270 days from passage,
Okay,
um,
that
to
helps.
enact this change.
That was gonna be my question. What's our timeline?
We got 9
That
months
certainly helps.
lead.
That takes us well into the late summer, early fall. That's enough time to get us going.
And I think that is on, let's see here, not later than 270 days after the date of enactment. So, I mean, they could theoretically speed it up, if they wanted as well.
Not to let my cynicism rise to the top, but this is the Postal Service we're talking about, Amy.
Well aware, well aware. But if our relationship is poor already, I'm gonna put it past them.
Good point, good point. All right. So, again, if, we'd be happy to answer questions. If you think of something, contact myself or Annika. We can get as best of answers for you, but unless I'm hearing differently, it sounds like there's a consensus for us to reach out to the congressional offices and ask them to remove their hold.
One more question. Is there any, I mean, other than these holds that have been placed, is there any reason to think that this is contentious legislation?
No, there's really not. There is some concern, I would say, with our elected officials, just how this bill came to be. You know, it seems like they would have liked to have been consulted earlier in the process, since the community that had their constituents in it was listed on the bill. So I think there are just some process concerns that folks have, but otherwise, no, I'm not aware of any contention with the bill.
Okay.
Other than we would like it to be a little bit better, but that's us.
Right. So I'm hearing from everyone that we withdraw the hold, and we are all comfortable with that at this point. And if that needs to change, we will reconvene at a later date. And in the meantime, staff will keep us updated on where things stand. Anything else to add before we adjourn?
I don't
All
think
right.
so. I bet this wasn't on your list of things to do today, but you guys.
No, I just
did a
said, I
great
didn't have any budget meetings, and I thought, boy, I got an afternoon free. And then they all started pouring into the office, and I gotta tell you, hats off to Annika, who's done a hell of a job on this whole thing, because it is, as I said, I joked about the support group, the level of frustration that she's been through and her counterparts in other cities. And you'd think that, well, this is a city, and we'd like to have you assign this zip code because they're within our geographic boundaries. You'd think that would be easy. But, and the zip code process was established to make mail delivery easier. So again, this has been, I'll give her all the credit in the world. She's, if we had a second story of the building, she probably would have jumped out of it by now. But at the same time, it is one of those things where, again, those of you who've dealt with federal legislative issues, they can be just terribly frustrating. And then surprisingly, that all of a sudden you wait, and then boom, things happen quickly. So I'm going to give all the credit to her because she's worked extremely hard on this. And again, looking for the perfect resolution. We're not going to get it, but this may be as good as we're going to get.
Well, with that, I think we all are appreciative of your work, Annika, and I am comfortable moving us to adjournment.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Maybe.